Hey guys, welcome to Power Within with me, Amy, your heart whisperer therapist. I'm a good wife.
Vicky, I'm the queen of rapid hypnosis,
Together with the Eastwoods, and we're going to be covering therapy,
hypnotherapy,
couples relationship therapy,
hypnosis, and all the other shit in between.
If it's current, if it's relevant,
we'll be covering it. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back to Power Within. Today we're going to talk about transactional analysis from a psychotherapy approach.
Bit of a mouthful, but the psychodynamic approach is something I love when we do therapy work. And this episode isn't intended to dwell on or bore you or go too much in depth with it, but something that keeps cropping up with our line of work and even in our house, even last night, which we'll share. But it's something that if you don't already know what transactional analysis means, you can just maybe educate slightly and then catch yourself in the moments when these things arise.
Yeah, because you'll actually realise that everyone goes in these states where you have three kind of ego states that influence all our thoughts, feelings and behaviours.
Yeah, how I downplay it to simplify it to a lot of people is like a traffic light system. Mm-hmm. And red, I guess, is the simple term. If you imagine red being angry as well, it's the parent state.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you got your parent state, adult state and your child state.
Yeah, and parent state, think of it as authoritative. Think of it as getting the last word. What you're laughing at, getting as management, leading, which can be healthy, but quite often can become overpowering. And often we live in our parent ego state based on previous experiences, behaviours, learnt feelings. The amber state, bearing in mind traffic light system, would be your adult ego state.
Mm-hmm. And that's it. What do you think you're sitting in sometimes? What's your most current state, do you think?
The healthiest version is adult state, and I would like to think I'm there more than any other.
Yeah, what about your child state with Kai?
It creeps in too often. Mm-hmm. But the adult state being amber is the way most humans should interact with each other, regardless of the age, regardless of power, title. I like to think we sit in an adult state quite often.
Yeah.
And the idea of today is, how do you speak to your partner? Maybe go away and Google the hell out of transactional analysis if we haven't already covered it enough. Some of you might share and cover it even better than us. We don't have it all figured out. But the ideal would be, an adult state would be adult to adult. I would talk, you would listen, you would respond, I would listen, and vice versa. I know some of the work that we do, a lot of relationships sit in the parent-adult, or even sometimes the extreme of parent-child.
Yeah, that's mainly most of them. When people do come to see you in a therapy world, you'll always come back in and say that was in the parent speaking to the child, and then when the child's not actually representing that what they need, it just doesn't fall into a very good category, does it? It doesn't work.
Yeah, and when somebody replies from a child state, if I'm the adult now and I'm talking to you as a child, my ego would need you to respond as a child, almost permissive, submissive, whichever way, but you get the response that your ego needs.
Mm-hmm.
When that transaction isn't met, that's where conflict arises. And to just simplify the rest of it, the green on the traffic light system, being the child ego state, can be playful, but also gives the answer that the adult is requiring.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of today is, can you catch yourself? Can you catch your habits? And more importantly, learn that you can, if willing, change them. Now, obviously, I've been doing some couples work, and I think one of them live in the adult most of the time, but she's living with somebody who's a parent, who talks to her and needs a response from a child state, if that makes sense to follow. So when she doesn't respond from a childlike mind, they clash because she isn't getting fulfilled in that conversation.
And that's why they split up most of the time.
That's why they're on the rocks quite a lot. And I caught myself doing it last night with Kai, accidentally, before we even thought we were talking about this. But we were playing pool at the club, and I can't remember the scenario, but Kai had said something, and I had responded. And I feel like I talk child to child with Kai quite a lot, way more than I probably should, because regardless of the age, he's nearly 12, he can hold a conversation, and I don't need to be authoritative with him. But I said something, and we were going back and forth, and I must have sat in the child state, and he crept into the adult, and his motion, if you're listening, there's actions to this, but he went, okay. Almost to shut me up. But it was appropriate for him, and it worked. And it was only this morning when we've started talking that I thought, okay, he was in the adult state and I was still in the child.
But Kai's trying to get better with his attitude as well, where he has sort of come to me a few times and said, Mom, will you come and help me do better with my attitude? Because his attitude's creeping in. He's just turning 12, so there's a little bit of a change in him, but still he's recognising the attitudes creeping in. And it's not an anger attitude though, is it? It's more frustration, I would say, which creeps into the anger. And he's recognising that, and he wants to pull away from that, which is quite smart of him.
And I guess this is a conversation to have with him, because how he explained it, he seems like he's always got an answer for everything. And we can say he should be a solicitor or a lawyer or a judge or something, because he'll argue to the death.
He's a good arguer.
But if we now backtrack in our own thoughts, he struggles with being told what to do.
Yeah.
Maybe because he wants to be spoken to like an adult, and he feels an injustice with school, with teachers, with us. And it's not like we treat him like a child, but maybe he doesn't see that gap as necessary.
Well, he feels that all adults think that they're right, and the children, nobody listens to the children. Where maybe at school, that might be the situation, but he's never really had that at home. But then that's where it's creeped in from school to home, when it's never really been like that.
And I think if we share this with him, something will click and he'll go, okay, because even talking about it now, I'm catching myself thinking, damn, I need this conversation with Kai.
Yeah.
Because he'll understand it like I did when I studied this. And if you Google it, or we might put some material on later date, if you see the traffic light system and you've got parent being red and the arrow goes down to green, that is the crossover, and actually that's where our communication falls. And I was took back by it because you see it so often, but the client, for you guys, you won't realise this is what's happening when you're having conflict. You won't realise this when you're asking your husband to turn the washing on. How are you asking him to do that? Because quite often maybe you talk to him in a child state unintentionally. And so if he doesn't respond back in that child state and he responds as an adult like he should, it becomes offensive, it becomes an argument, it becomes conflict. And I suppose that is why this is quite relevant today.
It is, but how many guys out there sometimes speak to their missuses like with anger in that adult state, and expect the partner to be the childlike, to say, I'm sorry, didn't mean that. And then he feels empowered then, because she's always going to back down.
But that goes back to learnt behaviours. So obviously if we talk about generational, you learn in your household growing up that the male, and this podcast should not be a male attack in any shape or form.
There's a couple that wants been to see you.
And so the power is often with him. He's the breadwinner, he provides, maybe he's louder. So yes, she so often used to answer back from the child response, and that would satisfy his need. As she's evolved, as she's become who she's become, she now sits in the adult state way more than she ever did. And he can't cope with that. That he's off balance, he's not getting the same response that he used to get. And he doesn't know how to be in that relationship.
But even though there's women out there what are angry at the guys, and you've had a lot of situations where the women's sort of needs to have the power, needs to always have the argument with the guys, where then the guys have said to you, I don't even know what to do anymore.
Because they're not submissive to the need of that level of communication. And I guess it's about growth. Firstly, can you catch yourself doing it? Twice I've sat here already in 10 minutes and caught the conversation I've had with Kai. So he'll be happy about this, because we'll have some adult-to-adult conversations about this analysis. And when you find yourself catching in the moment, can you shift? And we talked earlier, and probably not quite realising what goes on, but you'll do something sometimes, or maybe you've not done something, you've thought about it, and you'll say to me, don't shout. True?
Yeah, all the time.
And I might not have even opened my mouth. I might not have even looked up. I don't think I shout that much. But we can go back to a childlike state based on past memory.
Yeah, but you don't shout. It's just sometimes I just already know the tone. I'm like, oh, God, I didn't go do that today. And maybe it was going back. My mum never shouted at me. But what she did, she only had to look at me. And that's what... So then maybe it's the look when I'm thinking, oh, God, you're going to look at me and you're going to shout at me. But my mum never had to shout at me. She just looked at me. But then I think sometimes my stepdad he was shouting at the other brothers all the time. So maybe that might have crept in, where it's like, oh, God, don't shout. I don't like confrontation. I don't like arguing. I just like a nice, peaceful life.
At which point, and maybe I am louder, but at which point, if you put that on paper in front of a therapist, I'm already at a disadvantage based on your learned emotions back then. So now if I look at you, consciously you'll go, that's my wife and this is now. But there's a part of your subconscious that will take you back to your child state of, I'm in trouble.
No, I'm never really in trouble, but just I knew what not to do. And I knew that, dishes need doing. I'm married. Best get them done.
Shut up. But you'll sometimes go, oh, don't shout. And I think, what is my face doing?
Or maybe subconsciously you don't actually know
what my face says.
Yeah, and I probably already know what your face is saying when you go. That probably disappointment look. I'm like, oh, God. Oh, I didn't know. And again, I suppose it happens in every relationship. That's the thing. And I don't like I said, I don't really like that conflict. I don't like that anger. I just like to flow with life.
Flow. So today we nearly adopted another cat.
We did. Obviously. I did nearly adopt another cat, but it wasn't down to me. It was down to your mum. Mentioned as she was in the vets, a cat come in. What somebody was handing over what had already been in the wars a little bit. Only about a couple of months old kitten. And even your mum said, if my daughter was here, she wouldn't have it, but my daughter-in-law would definitely have the cat. She would take it in. But then I'd see you and I'd go, oh, God, don't shout. And that's my child state.
So we're still navigating it. We're still navigating transactional work. We're still navigating communication. Every time we press play on this, we like to be real. We like it to be from the heart. And if one of you can understand it and go, okay, they talk a lot of sense, then we've done something right. The other 100 of you might think we're talking nonsense, which is okay as well. But you will catch yourself in the moment saying, am I speaking from a parent state? Is this anger, is this emotion coming from that can I change and speak just from an adult, which would be human to human.
But bear in mind, there's lots of different, throughout the day, you go through all these 3 ego states, regardless if you like it or not. These 3 ego states creeps in, like when we go to work. Sometimes I can be childlike and mess around and have a laugh with the staff. And then sometimes I have to go in and we have to say, guys, this needs to change. And then you're in the adult state. But then as soon as people do see them different states in you, it's just whatever's right for the time. But it is better if you're all on that same path and that communication for things to work.
Yeah, and I think when we manage, and this was one of the questions today, how do you manage, how do you parent, how do you partner? And we manage staff. And I like to think we're respectful and we're calm and we're quite often 99% of the time in an adult state. You might be in child 10% when you're messing about past 12 o'clock and she's having fun. But the common joke is I'm on the serious train because probably I'm in the parent state of, guys, we've still got some work to do.
Yeah, but we don't mess around when we've still got work to do. We're still doing the work. We always have a laugh with the staff. And they enjoy having a laugh with the staff, but we always know that you're on the serious train. And then some of the staff follow suit. But then
it works. I thoroughly respect our staff. And I like to think
wicked.
they respect us. But yeah, how do you manage? Because how do you get the most out of somebody? Shouting at them will typically not work.
No.
People will shut down. Bossing and dictating shouldn't work because what do they say behind your back? I would like to say our staff, if you're listening, talk highly of us and appreciate our management skills. But it's not easy. And we've sort of shared between ourselves the last few weeks some of our own experiences where we've been managed, and maybe not for a while, but we've both been in roles where there's authority and another level of authority.
Yeah, but even with our staff, like we've took them in the back before when if people are like been arguing amongst themselves, and we've took them in the back, and I think we've gone into like parent state and said, right, you talk to her, right, what's going off? And then all of a sudden it's like, right, now you need to hug it out. And that's like a parent state.
Yeah.
But you've managed to, then they have like sort of uncomfortably hugged it out, but then they've gone back in and they've been okay. Maybe it's a really bad way to manage, but it works.
We HR, we payroll, that's it. But yeah, hug it out, sort it out, like you would do with your 2 kids that have just had a little squabble in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I don't think this house sits in parent state very often. Mm-hmm. Very rarely, maybe that's the look. We'll look at the boys and there'll be a tone, and that's enough to sort of pull them back. And it's very, very rarely anyway. But maybe because we are quite equipped to talk on the adult level. Mm. You know what I mean? We're quite open. After this, I need to get even better at not sitting in the child state myself with Kai, like I caught myself last night. But I think the idea of us sharing this is that we don't always have it figured out, regardless of our degrees and our knowledge. We're just a work in progress as well.
So tell us a little bit about your experience then.
Mine was when I worked in custody. And obviously I've touched a little bit. I worked in Handsworth. For anyone living in Birmingham, Handsworth police station was not a nice one. But I loved the job. I respected it. I was punctual. It probably helped me to mature quite a lot. And there was one sergeant. So my job was to look after the prisoners, whether that was drug testing, booking you in, but also help the sergeant run the custody block. Mm-hmm. So yes, he was the authority, but I was effectively his assistant. But my payroll meant I assisted him. I assisted the process whilst you were there. My payroll wasn't tea lady. And there was this sergeant in question, and I really got on with him in the end. But he'd come in, click his fingers, O'Brien, coffee too. I'm like, okay, the first time I made one. a bit later on, coffee too. And I'm okay with that. At work, I probably make more tea than Leanne's ever made or vice versa. I think me and Mary are the tea lady. So, yes, he's a sergeant, but he's also a human being. So I will make you 5-6 cups, but then I expect one back. And that wasn't from an authority point of view. That was a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to the point when he was in custody for a few weeks and I was on shift with him. He'd walk in, he'd almost salute me and say, "O'Brien, you want a tea too?" And even if I didn't want one, I'd take one. Because he knew the rule. I would make you 5 or 6, but then you've got to make me one back. Just from being a human being, person to person, regardless of our payroll and our grade. And so his officers would come in, they'd need documents signing. They would say, "You know he's the sergeant, he doesn't make drinks." I'm like, "In here he does." But we got on a treat. I ended up going sailing around the Isle of Wight with him and a couple of his team. And I just feel like that is, for me, what respect is. I will go above and beyond, but just now and again I want it back.
But that's communication as well, because realistically that communication builds relationships. So even with our staff, we don't speak to them like in any management tone, but then we get everything what we need. They always go above and beyond for us, and we go above and beyond for them. So even at Christmas time, you ask them who wants what off, who can work what. Like there's no other workplace, especially a bar, what even gets offered that, but it works, and that's because of your communication with our staff and our role, what we play, and the role what they play, all works. And
I think it is that respect. I know they work for us, but who wants to? There's some that won't work Christmas Eve because they've got young kids. So what is the point in us saying you're on Christmas Eve? Because they're going to hate the shift. They're going to resent being there. Let's give somebody who doesn't have kids that shift. And then some of the younger ones that will want to go out New Year's Eve, they can have New Year's Eve off. So it is about respecting it. Like I remember texting the other day, who's off in July because we want to go on holiday. Because it has to work. So I think we've got a good balance with our work staff. Although I feel like whenever I do one-to-ones with them, they feel like the child and I'm in the adult, into the parent even. And I don't even know what to do with them. But they often feel like they're coming in trouble, which they're not. It might just be a check-in. And they're relieved when it's done. So maybe there is a look that I give. Maybe I have to look at myself in the mirror a little bit harder because it's not intended.
Okay. Well, that's cleared that.
Well, share your experience.
My experience. Well, clearly everyone knows that I was in the forces before. And my staff sergeant, when we used to go on exercise, I was only 17, 18, and I've got my HGV licence driving them big, they're called DAFs, these big lorries, no power steering. And we did a night move, and he asked me, you have to warm the brakes up, which it sounds mental, but you used to have to accelerate and brake at the same time to warm the brakes up, otherwise you're braking, it would thud, you'd end up jolting. So doing this night move, it says when the light goes off, we're in a field, obviously there's an officer somewhere, can't see him, the light was on. When the light goes off, I want you to stop. None of this warming my brakes up staff. I want you to stop, and stop immediately. Do you understand, Eastwood? Yes, staff. I already had my seatbelt on. He didn't have his seatbelt on. He just put his helmet on. The light went off. I hit the brakes like he asked me to. I did exactly what he said. And he hit the windscreen a little bit too hard. But then he fell in the footwell, and he's like, "Oh, Eastwood, what you just done?" I says, "Well, I told you I need to warm my brakes up, stuff." But he sat up and it was all right. But it was only like a little thud against the windscreen. But again, you can't speak to people in that tone. So and I did exactly what he told me to do.
Saying that out loud,
mm-hmm.
Do you think you went into child ego state?
Absolutely. I did what I was told. The parent was telling me what to do. I braked. Luckily for the child, had the seatbelt on. The adult didn't.
So child rebellious state. And I guess the army 25 years ago was a different in terms of authority. But again, there's still a way to talk to each other.
We did have good relations. You do have good relations in the military anyway. Obviously, they are authority. They are like the boss. You do exactly what they tell you to do, regardless if it's right or wrong. But that's the reason why I think he understood my sense of humour anyway. But he didn't quite find it funny. And I just secretly giggled because that's what he told me to do.
In that child state.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it sounds complicated, and you can Google the hell out of transactional analysis, because I know each and every one of you that will listen to this will at some stages sit in it, all of them. The ideal would be you would quite often be an adult. You know what I mean? You'll communicate and it'll be clear, it'll be reciprocated, and live in harmony.
But again, even going back to children, you might say something to them, say like, "Can you go take me them clothes upstairs?" And it's, why me? That they always have that mentality of, well, you're always picking on me. Why is it always me? Why are you not asking him?
Well, and that is the child state, isn't it? It's the hard done by, it's the rebellious, it's the almost a pity. But as they evolve, like Kai's evolved loads this last few years, and I guess as they evolve, that is where they will naturally sit into that adult state. But I think as we continue this podcast, as we continue to talk about parenting, and not from a point of view that we've got it all figured out, but I shared it briefly the other week about attachment theory. And I don't know if I'll bore the hell out of everybody, but I think as parents, if you understand what attachment theory means and your style, how we then impact our kids, how we talk to them, how we nurture them, how we share our love for them. I feel like one day, if anything, I want midwives to pass every new parent this book, because I think it can really help. It could really educate how much we impact our kids. And I suppose for Kai, maybe it took him a hell of a long time to get out of that child ego state because of his first few years. Like if we remember going back to when he was 4, I would describe him as feral.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was swearing, he had no routine. They actually thought he had a speech impairment, if you remember, because he just couldn't say very many words. And the reality is he just wasn't interacted with the way a 2, 3, 4-year-old should be to start learning language. And thankfully the waiting list was so long that he never actually got that support, and clearly didn't need it, because he teaches us now. He's incredible.
Yeah. Well, let's finish on a positive. You've written something, a nice little quote down. You can finish on it this time.
I've spoke too much.
Oh, you never speak enough. Go on, you can do it.
This quote, again, a lot of this stuff is not ours, but it's catching. And it says, "You are allowed to unlearn who you've been. If it isn't who you are or who you want to be anymore, then you can change." So try and catch yourself in how you communicate. Think back to a scenario that you've had a recent argument and go, could I have done differently? And I suppose in terms of something that's circulating for me right now is somebody said something recently that was quite hurtful. And I guess the previous me would have gone into that child state, responded just to have a word, just to try and clear something up. And the adult state of me goes, I'm not going to achieve anything by doing that. I'm not going to change what's been said. I might change their opinion, but actually their opinion doesn't really matter to us.
Right.
So can you catch yourself? Can you unlearn some of the behaviours if they're not necessarily serving you well?
There you go.
I will unlearn my facial expressions.
Because again, what are you going to achieve by winning an argument? That's what I've tried to drill into Kai sometimes. He wants to finish the argument. He wants to argue until he knows he's right, or you think, okay, yeah, you're right. And like we've said before, two people can see the same accident and have two complete different versions. So her version is what she thinks and believes, and your version is the truth to you. But her version is probably how she thinks and the truth to her. So again, you've got to let things go. Let it go.
Yeah, my adult state says I'm not going to achieve anything from
Absolutely.
having that conversation.
There you go. Wrap
And
it up for
so
today.
I've moved it forward. Clearly sits heavy with me a little bit, but I'm over it.
Well done.
But guys, I hope it was helpful. I'd hope that we haven't bored you about some of the theory side of the stuff that we do. It's not the intention. But thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Be safe.